Hi, I'm Phil Anderson and welcome to my channel. I've been a property investor now for over 30 years and I've watched investors continue to make the same common investment mistakes. There's so many dirty tricks in the real estate industry and it's all caught up in a whole heap of sales hype. I want to cut through that sales hype and help investors avoid the common mistakes. I hope you enjoy the following content, but please remember to like and subscribe. G'day listeners and viewers across the country and welcome to another episode of Street Smart Property Investing, where I'm joined by Mr. Trent Durrington once again. How are you, Durro?
Phil, good mate. Good. What a week it's been.
Mate, it's been a big one and there's a big topic for today. We want to talk about our spring forecast, like what's going to happen in the spring of 2021. The national property market is motoring along at a really, unprecedented pace. But what we're now starting to see is, I guess, a little bit of confusion because of the lockdowns in Sydney. We're seeing people that are potentially realising that we may not be in a post-COVID environment. We may still, for some time, continue to see these COVID conditions and lockdowns being implemented. That's brought up a couple of really interesting questions in the mind of investors. What does all that mean? What's that mean over the months ahead? Will the property market start to taper off? What will happen? Mate, any thoughts on, the feeling, I guess, on the ground? You're still seeing a huge amount of buyer interest on the ground?
Yeah, regardless, mate, of the home builder grant or the stimulus, the home buyers are out there still entering new contracts, so that prediction of it dropping off a cliff, and it's not happening. There's still home buyers out there that are building new products. There's still a real shortage of stock on the ground, which is obviously just supply. It's all about supply and demand. And we're having record sales on existing through winter and through COVID. So you can only imagine where we're going to be at spring and where this market's still running.
Well, mate, it feels like, and it's really interesting because you are watching on a daily basis the transactions that are happening, trying to get access to land and obviously trying to help investors, break into the market in, incredibly hard times where it's very hard to get stock. We are hearing that the Sydney market, while it's in this confined lockdown and the forecast at the moment doesn't look good, they may be in a extended lockdown period. We believe that what that will amount to is even more, I guess, built up pressure and more built up excitement about getting out of the city. That urban exodus trend, we think we'll see a second wave of that, come September, October of this year. More and more, we're already losing, I think, about 14,000 people a quarter out of Sydney that are rolling out into regional New South Wales, pushing up into Queensland. Queensland is the big winner in the movement of people around Australia. And whilst this lockdown may be, making people think, what does it mean? We believe that all roads will lead to a second wave of excitement to make that move.
Yeah, no, you're right, mate. It's from my perspective, it's just onwards. It's very tough finding the right land to position clients. So a lot of patience needed, and just I guess the word is patient. And just trying to find put the round peg in the round hole, so to speak. But the other you mentioned on the regionals there and the push out of Sydney and Melbourne, and the big factor I also think is regional Queensland. Obviously, with southeast Queensland, there's a big population run, but when southeast Queensland has its boom, which it's having now, and specifically those Brisbane people, and they understand, the equity they've made, they're going to be looking for lifestyle changes as well. So I see that ripple effect happening in regional coastal Queensland.
Mate, I've been watching some data. Before today, I wanted to check up all the latest data. That ripple coming out of Sydney, pushing up through the coast of New South Wales, all the regional areas, but an area we watch really closely is the mid-north coast of New South Wales, Port Macquarie, Coffs Harbour. Really interesting data around Foster, Taree, where the increase in buyer volumes are the highest across regional New South Wales, which was very interesting. We saw substantial growth, substantial uplift in buyer interest in the last 6 months of 2020. We forecast that by the start of 2021, Southeast Queensland would be really feeling the pressure of that. And of course, over recent months, that's become very, very evident. We've seen substantial lift in buyer volume. Land is in very short supply, which is really putting upward pressure under land values. And now we're starting to see Southeast Queensland even stretch its boundaries. We're seeing that buyer pressure and that population growth pressure push out north of the Sunshine Coast. We're seeing that excitement and that momentum build up through the Fraser Coast at Hervey Bay, pushing up towards Bundaberg.
Oh, yeah.
Some really exciting stuff happening as that area becomes, really alive with activity.
Yeah, those two towns you just mentioned there, Hervey Bay and Bundaberg, supply on the ground's really restricted. Buyer demand's really high. Vacancy rates are dangerously low, critical, and that's only going to get worse.
And it is, mate. And a really interesting headline I read through the week was that house prices are, performing very strongly, not despite COVID, but because of COVID. COVID has really changed our property markets forever. We were already forecasting that there was a huge amount of baby boomers that would need to downsize and would need to consider movement. We'd been forecasting that and adjusting our strategies over recent years to allow for that population movement. But, that we weren't, reinventing the wheel there. Plenty of local governments were preparing and scaling up their infrastructure and so forth, and we might come back to that in a second. But with COVID hitting, now there's this remote workforce that's able to live and work from wherever they want to. People are looking at life differently. People don't want to be in medium to high density. They want to be in low density. Mate, we're
big reset across, everybody's lifestyle. It'll be, when we come out of this in a decade or two, it'll be interesting to see how our children reflect, or teenagers or young adults reflect on this time, and what their perception of lifestyle is. So there's, still a lot of unknowns, positive changes for us and our clients as far as, where we have traditionally and continue to invest in regional areas.
Change is happening at such a pace, mate. That's one thing that's happening. Every month there's change. I've never seen a time where perceptions of what could be the changes to someone's attitude towards moving to a regional area, which was at one stage a little embarrassing perhaps for people to think about leaving Sydney and moving to a big country town or whatever they thought it. Now people are very excited. They now are quite proud, and people are excited for them that they've got the opportunity to move to those big key regionals, enjoy a better lifestyle. Perceptions are changing very quickly about our Australian property markets in general.
Yeah, no question, mate. The speed of and the amount of people that are moving into the regions is amazing.
Mate, the regionals have never been hotter. They've never been hotter than what they are right now. But remember, we'd already forecast that those regional areas were due to get unprecedented levels of population growth because of that huge swell in our population timeline of the baby boomers. Rewind back to the 1950s, we had an unprecedented amount of babies born. That's the baby boomer phase. 70 years later, they're all entering retirement. Those numbers are climbing by close to 200,000 people per year.
What's that number?
200,000 people a year, 186,000 people a year, and it's got another 6 years to run that are transitioning into retirement. They're going beyond their retirement years. It's the biggest swell of population that will ever go into retirement in our known lifetimes. And that number of people it's a backlog of people at the moment, mate.
Yeah, and then potentially some of those have been delayed, so if that may cause a pent-up demand Lots of layers to that to try and understand.
It's well documented that through the GFC, many of their super funds were hurt. They've stayed in the workforce a bit longer. They're ready to transition into retirement now. Many of them, they believe as many as 1 million houses are currently being renovated, new kitchen or new bathroom or whatever in Sydney and Melbourne, with the aim of selling over the next 2 or 3 years to be able to allow them to downsize and move to areas that, they can buy a house for half the price and set themselves up for retirement. It's a big number.
Big number. And another thing is I'm hearing, you look at some of the tourist numbers and the locals, Australians travelling internally and probably seeing parts of Australia they actually haven't been to before, being a little bit more adventurous, getting to these regional, coastal and country towns and think, it's an eye-opener.
And man, I think it's even more impressive today because, like I said, those regional areas were expecting the population, wave to come out of Sydney and Melbourne because of those baby boomers. The hospitals, the airports, a lot of the infrastructure has really been, improved even before COVID, and now they're pushing even harder to continue to, improve roads and, infrastructure in those local areas. So I think a lot of people are getting a surprise at the level of retail, cafes, shopping. They don't miss out on very much compared to living in a city, and they can get anywhere in 10 or 15 minutes. It seems to be an eye-opener for those people travelling.
Yeah, it's convenience, right? It's convenience, it's time they're not spending in the car, and it's time with their family. It's one thing money doesn't buy, right? It's time.
Absolutely, mate. You can't get back that hour commute, that time lost.
Yeah,
and
unless they're listening to a podcast of.
Well, that's a good way to travel, right? Listen to it, but at the same time, the jobs that have been created, all that stuff, all that infrastructure, all that population movement, there's never been a time that I've ever known of that the swing of job creation in Australia, where all the employment growth is in those regional areas as well. So now people are moving because they can keep their jobs and work remotely. They're creating more jobs on the ground in those local areas. Mate, it is just a booming phase for regional Australia, and I think we're going to see a second wave of it when spring, time comes around, and I think we're looking at a second wave of a boom in spring of 2021.
Yeah, look, I have to agree. Again, just coming off a booming winter, biggest all time as far as the growth. It's set up for a massive spring and summer. Yeah,
mate, I think we'll see, like I said, another level of excitement, interest, energy, which I think will shock people, but I think there's going to be, like I said, it's going to go to phase 2 of this broad-based boom that we're now experiencing.
Yeah.
Mate, we'll come back with some more details because I know you're also going to give the listeners in future weeks a bit of an update on where you think those opportunities will really pop up, how you think we'll be able to get access to more land, more opportunities, investors. Bit of a changeover phase happening. So there's some interesting topics within that topic that we should touch on as well.
There is. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, mate, good to catch up. I hope you got a little bit of a insight as to what to expect to see in spring of 2021. Take care, guys.
Good on you.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and also feel free to leave me a question. I look forward to helping as many property investors as possible. Take care, and we'll talk soon.